an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Vor Saga, book whatever, the Vor Game, chapters 13 and 14, but also the tail end of chapter 12, which I did not get to last time. In these chapters, Miles is just so good about turning things that are accidental or were not intentional on his part, at least, to his advantage. And it really got me thinking about how much worse I would be at most of this. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Sofia for commissioning this episode. What's up, Sofia? So, yes, we are moving into the new breakdown of chapters, which has been redone painstakingly. Thank you to everybody who commissioned, because I take too damn long talking about things. Although, I will say, most of the time, I will take responsibility for it if that's what's going on. But these are really, really dense books. So I actually feel like it's not really as much my tangents to blame on this as often is the case. So you guys, this chapter 12, this is so weird. I don't really know what to think of this, but I'm just going to get into it. Because Miles is being kept separate from Gregor here, right? And due to not being in contact with him, it's possible that what it looks like is happening is indeed happening. Or it could be that Gregor is just really smart, playing like what he thinks Livia New is trying to get him to do. I don't know if I should still call her that. It seems like we call her Cavillo pretty much the rest of the book, so maybe maybe I should change that. I don't know, but I think I'll go with Cavillo just because that's the book's choice. I knew her first as Livia New, and I do tend to be somebody that, like, however a character was first introduced to me is what sticks in my brain, because I'm not really good with names. So whenever I manage to remember a name, I just kind of cling to it for dear life, and that is not their problem. That's a me problem. But yeah, this thing that we find out later, I am like pretty sure that this is Gregor just like playing a bitch. But I don't know Gregor that well yet, and there's a certain magnetism to her that I could see being appealing. I don't know. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. But so, I had described previously how Miles is just getting these like power bars and no interaction really, and he isn't like he's just barely able to keep track of the days because they dim the lights slightly, but it doesn't seem like they ever completely go out. And he is just, combined with the way that he had been put off to the side after the mutiny, it's sort of wild how often Miles winds up in solitary confinement in these books. Like, I have never gone through anything like this, and I often wonder what it would be like, because I know that a lot of us, when we are introverts, are sort of like, I would be fine. That wouldn't even, like, I wouldn't even notice, you know? And I am a weird, like, introverted extrovert, where I definitely like to be around people and, this is what I do, but also it does drain me and I need to recover. So a part of me is like, that might be a nice rest. And then another part of me is like, you just don't know what you're talking about. It sounds like a nice rest because you live in a capitalist hellscape where you just can't stop doing, or else you'll drown like a shark. And if you were actually put into this, you would understand how different it is to what you are imagining. Because, like, he's here with nothing to do. There's no books, there's no Netflix, there's no internet, there's nothing. And that's a real different beast. Although people do pay to go into like these sorts of programs to have complete silence and be free from technology and whatnot. Um, so Kavila comes in and she says that he looks like shit. And he says, I really liked the way this was worded. My medical problems compel me to a self disciplined lifestyle if they're not to flare up and impede me. I definitely need an exercise period or I'm going to get really sick. And I think he is telling the truth. I don't think this is without its ulterior motive. I don't think anything Miles says is ever just what it is he's saying. But I couldn't tell whether she took him seriously or not. Um, she says, "Tell me about your mother." And it turns out the reason that she is asking this is because she is trying to get a sense of how likely it is that she could be accepted as a Vor into Barayaran society. And it seemed like it took a little bit for Miles to pick up on what exactly it was she was going for here. Um, so despite being an enemy, your mother's military background actually helped gain her respect and acceptance amongst the Boer. I guess so. Plus, she established quite a local military reputation in the fighting of Vordarian's pretendership the year I was born, twice. So it has been done, therefore, it can be done. And he's still not getting it. He says, How is Gregor? And she says, Quite amusing. I meant his health. Rather better than yours, from the look of you. I trust he's been better fed. What, a taste of real military life too strong for you, Lord Varkosian? You've been fed the same as my troops. Can't be. Miles held up a ragged half-gnawed breakfast chew. They'd have mutinied by now. Oh, dear. Those. I thought they'd been condemned. How did they end up here? Someone must be economizing. Shall I order you a regular menu? Yes, thank you. I have to assume that this is Metsov, that he was like supposed to get good food, and Metsov was like, no, fuck that guy, because he can't actually punish Miles in a physical way the way he would like. He's going to punish him in a physical way that's sort of indirect and just, not as harsh necessarily, but also has its own repercussions. Um, so she he's like, "Do you get what you're starting between Vervain and Barriar with holding Gregor like this?" And she's like, "Oh, no, no, no. I haven't kidnapped him. I'm not holding him. I rescued him. And now he's under my protection." And she says, Stannis, which is Metsov's first name, and I really meant to mention this last time, but what is it about the name Stannis being used for people who are kind of insufferable hard asses? Like, are there actual people out there with this name? It's not one that I have come across in real life. I assume that it's nevertheless real, but there was a part of me that was sort of like, if there were a real Stannis out there, I feel like I would start to get offended that this is the name that always gets used when somebody is supposed to be kind of immovable in a lot of ways. You know what I'm saying? But I got lucky. And so my name, Natasha, gets used a lot when we are meant to be like talking about a really intimidating, beautiful woman who's like a little exotic and sexy and, that kind of vibe. That's when the name Natasha usually gets used. So I have no problem with that for me. Um, but yeah, there's certain names I feel like that do sort of take on a kind of character of their own after they've been used enough. So, yeah, she says, Stana seems quite worried about the secret police of Barrayar. They must be very embarrassed back in IMSEC to have so thoroughly mislaid their charge. I fear their reputation is exaggerated. Not quite. I'm IMSEC and I know where Gregor is, so technically IMSEC is right on top of the situation. Oh, that did make me laugh. He does not say that out loud for those not reading along. That was italicized. So this is when it starts to become clear what it is that she's after as she begins talking about how Gregor ran away to get away from a woman that he loathed. And Miles starts to say he hadn't mentioned it to me, and then realizes if she's asking this question, it must be the story that he is feeding her, so he doesn't want to fuck it up for Gregor. So he immediately sort of catches himself as he says that, and then is like, well, there are concerns because, he's getting old enough that if is to die without an heir, there would be a lot of problems that would come up because of this, which is true. They talked about this before. So his advisors would be glad to see him married. Overjoyed, I expect. You're not imagining you could make yourself Empress of Barrayar, are you? Of course I couldn't, but Greg could. Why not? I'm the right sex, and apparently of the right military background. How old are you? Lord Vorkosigan, really, what a rude question. If we were on the same side, we could work together. Commander Cavillo, I don't think you understand Barrayar or Barrayarans. Actually, there have been eras in Barrayaran history where Cavillo's command style would have fit right in. And that was what I was thinking, and I was so glad that it immediately followed, because as soon as he starts to be like, well, I don't think you get it, I was like, they might not accept her, Miles, but I do think she gets it. I feel like she is a lot more in tune with the way certain people think, which is evidenced by the fact that Metsov has thrown in with her and seems to really think that, like, this is going somewhere, even though he plans to take her out of power. Nevertheless, I don't think he would have aligned himself with somebody who wasn't as brutal as she is. I don't think he would see it as worthwhile because he would assume failure. Um, so the let's see, she's like, they talk for a moment about the captain and how she executed out of hand and what happened to his family. And she says he was a traitor and sold out his planet for money. He was caught in espionage. There is no moral difference between ordering an execution and carrying it out. I agree. So do a lot of legal codes. How about a difference between execution and murder? Vervain is not at war. His actions may have been illegal, warranting arrest, trial, jail, or sociopath therapy. Where did the trial part drop out? A Barrayaran arguing legalities. How strange. And he asks what happened to the captain's family. And it then says she'd had a moment to think, blast it. And she says the tedious Vervani demanded their release. Naturally, I didn't want him to know they were out of my hands, or I'd lose my only hold on his actions. But he doesn't know if this is true, or if it is just something that sounds good on the surface and makes her sound a little bit less cold-blooded, because she's evidently trying to soften her image now. Like, it's interesting that she's clearly had a hold on everybody using a type of fear and a type of pressure that in reality I'm not totally sure she's comfortable with. She's doing it and it doesn't seem like she has real compunction about it. But there is a sense for me of like, I'd prefer to do it another way. I just know that nobody's going to take that seriously. I don't know. I don't know. So he gets way better food, 5 elegant courses with 2 wines and espresso coffee as an antidote. Miles didn't think Cavillo's troops ate like this either. He envisioned a platoon of smiling, replete, obese gourmets strolling happily into battle. The dog chews would be much more effective for raising aggression levels. Um, so he gets some clean clothes and he's thinking about Cavillo and like where she may have come from, what her background could even be. And he thinks that she must have really fucked up somewhere really badly because she is so good at this and seems like so competent that it's likely she had been in a position that was like sanctioned by somebody and then found herself at a loose end for some reason, which is a really interesting thought that I kind of like. And based on some things we find out later, I think that has some merit. Um, so, and he also thinks that like the fact that she's sort of, the word he uses is flamboyant is a bit of a smokescreen to distract people, which makes a ton of sense, especially as a woman. You know that people are going to sort of lean into that thought with you anyway, a lot of the time. You may as well turn that into a weapon. You may as well use that, why not? So he eventually, there is a man brought to him who is like, oh, yeah, I recognize him, Admiral Naismith. You really should hire him. He's a military genius. And he is thinking, oh, motherfucker, I had almost gotten away without her knowing this, but she seems very delighted to have this information. And so, chapter 13, all 3 of his identities were granted an exercise period that afternoon. A small onboard gymnasium was cleared for his exclusive use. He studied the setup sharply for the hour as he tried out various pieces of equipment, checking distances and trajectories to guarded exits. He could see a couple of ways Ivan might succeed in jumping a guard and making a break for it. Not fragile, short-legged Miles. For a moment, he found himself actually wishing he had Ivan along. I don't believe you. I just don't believe you. By a fraction of a second, perhaps. Um, so he runs into Oser's lieutenant, and this is the first time that I I don't actually, I take it back. I don't think this is the first time that we have seen the effects of fast penta. I believe that when we were in his mother's POV in book 2, eventually there is somebody who has been fast pented that we're seeing like at the tail end of an interrogation, but these chapters are the first time we really get a look at what that is like, and it is super creepy. It is a very different thing than what I was expecting. But yeah, this guy has been fast pented and he has shock stick marks all over him and is like shivering and giggling, and he doesn't have a shirt on, like to grant easier access to his skin with the shock sticks, I'm assuming. Um, and he is just like, this is the dude who had been supposed to throw Miles and Gregor out the airlock. So evidently, we're gathering some more intel on the Dendari fleet, I guess Oseran fleet at this point. Um, and I love this line. What are you doing here? That had to be the most asked, least answered question in the Hagen hub, Miles decided. Though he bet the Oseran lieutenant had answered it, Cavillo must command one of the sharpest counterintelligence departments in the hub. How fast had the Oseran mercenary traced Miles and Gregor here? How soon had Cavillo's people spotted him and picked him up? The marks on his body were not over a day old. Most important of all, had the Oseran come to the Vervain station as part of a general systematic sweep, or had he followed specific clues? Was Tongue compromised? Elena arrested? And we find out later, no such thing. But I understand his thinking here. So eventually he gets gathered up and brought to see Cavillo, and she tells him, I am going to be sending you back to the Oseran mercenaries. You're going to take them back over, and then once you're in command again, I will tell you what to do next. And he's like, what are you talking about? And she, starts this off with like, your emperor is in terrible trouble. Greg is my best friend, the love of my life, at last. I'd do anything for him. I'd even give up my career, she smirked piously. If any other course of action occurs to you besides following your instructions to the letter, well, it could land Greg in unimaginable troubles at the hands of worse enemies. Why do you want me in charge of the Dendari mercenaries? I can't tell you. It's a surprise. What would you give me to support this enterprise? Transportation to Aslan Station. What else? Troops, guns, ships, money? I'm told you could do it with your wits alone. This I wish to see. Oser will kill me. He's already tried once. That's a chance I must take. It's Shrek, guys. It's Shrek. This is a sacrifice I am willing to make. You mean me to be killed. What if I succeed instead? The key of strategy, little Vor, she explained kindly, is not to choose a path to victory, but to choose so that all paths lead to a victory. Ideally, your death has one use, your success another. I will emphasize that any premature attempt to contact Barrier could be very counterproductive. Very. So, the way that they do this, eventually it becomes clear like he's got this weird allergic reaction to her perfume. And she initially thinks that he's crying and she starts to call him a coward, but then he begins sneezing repeatedly. And I am so curious what this has to do with anything because I don't feel that this little bit of business was inserted just for the comedic effect. There has to be something about this that winds up coming up later. And a part of me is almost like, is Miles going to wind up like in a place where, as in a horror movie, he's hiding and just out of sight while she's walking around trying to find him, and he winds up starting to sneeze and has to hold it in or else be caught? Like that sort of Chekhov's gun. I don't know. I'm just making this up. But eventually he is treated, feels better, and then she packs him into this like inflatable, I don't even remember what it is called, but it's essentially something that is being like sent directly to the other ship, but only fits his body in it. And it's described later as like something that inflates and deflates. I'm sure it has like a solid outside to it, but interior seems like it's plastic. And he isn't even given boots. He's got his still, I think they're little slippers, I think is what he's still wearing. Um, let's see. The Aslander Merc will pick you up, maybe. If they don't decide you're a bomb and try to set you off in space with a plasma fire from their ship or something. Uh, we chose to change our flight plan and return to Vervain Station. We therefore have no need for pre-docking inspection. We're going to leave you a small parting gift, quite small. What you do with it is your problem. The Bod Pod, that's what it's called, was a cheap inflatable life support unit designed to be entered in seconds by endangered passengers, suitable either for pressurization emergencies or abandoning ship. They were also dubbed idiot balloons. They required no knowledge to operate because they had no controls, merely a few hours of recyclable air and a locator beeper. Passive, foolproof, and not recommended for claustrophobes. They were very cost-effective in saving lives when adequate pickup ships arrived in time. So, that's terrifying. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? I mean, I have always thought that the kinds of lifeboats that you would get in the case of like the Titanic sinking sounded really scary anyway, because sure, you're not in the water, but you are not able to like get anywhere, you know? You could row for God knows how long before you reach land, depending on where this event takes place. But this is so much worse. There's like so much less control even here. Oh my God. I did not envy him being put in this position because there's simply nothing for him to do. Um, so eventually, when he gets out, he is in the cargo bay of the Acer. And who is here? I remember that Thorn, I believe, is here. I'm trying to find the spot where they open him up. Oh, Pandora. That is what he calls her because she opened the box. Um, Thorne's expression melted from skepticism to astonishment as Miles rose to view. I think maybe is it only Belle? I keep wanting to say her. I keep doing that. It's they. I'm gonna do they. Um, Somehow I figured what are you doing here might be your first question. And what are you doing in the ranger suit? Goodness, I'm glad you're not of the shoot first and ask questions later school. And Thorne has all these soldiers behind her that see, I'm doing it. Soldiers behind them that they have to order to stand down. Thorne says it's all right, and Miles says, I wish that were true. So he explains the situation, and Thorne says, we were last in dock 5 days ago. That's when the Aslanders concocted this pre-docking inspection routine. Um, there are rumors of your death. They're all over. 14 garbled versions. I'd have discounted them. You've been cited before, you know. But then suddenly Oser arrested Tongue. Only Tongue? Not Elena, Mayhew, Chodak? Only Tongue. That makes no sense. If he'd arrested Tongue, he'd have fast pented him and he'd have to spill on Elena. Unless she'd been left free as bait. Things got real tense when Tongue was taken. Ready to explode. I think if Oser moved on Elena and Baz, it would have sparked a war right then. Yet he hasn't backed down and reinstated Tongue. Very unstable. Oser's taking care to keep the old inner circles separated. That's why I've been out here for nearly a bloody week. But last time I saw Baz, he was damn near edgy enough to commit to fight, and that was the last thing he'd wanted to do. So, this is quite a situation for him to be coming into, considering the direction things are going to have to go if he is not. If Gregor isn't going to get hurt. I was going to say if Miles isn't, but really the threat is hanging over Gregor's head. Miles would certainly be hurt, but that would be an afterthought. I feel like that would be handled later on. Um, so he's like, look, I really, really have to talk to Oser. And Thorne is like, all right, let's do this. And I love when he comes in, Oser's just like, motherfucker. Like, he just wants to be rid of this kid and he cannot get away. Hello, Admiral Oser. I've completed my evaluation of Ravani forces in the Hagen Hub, and my conclusion is you are in deep trouble. How did you get on the secured channel? And he wants to trace it. And he says, you'll be able to determine in a few minutes how I'm here. You'll have to keep me online till you do. But your enemy is at Vervain Station, not here. Not Paul, not Jackson's Hole, and most certainly not me. Note I said Vervain Station, not Vervain. And he brings up Cavillo. Oser has heard of her. He describes her as face like an angel, mind like a rabid mongoose. um, And so Oser accuses Thorne of mutiny, and Thorne is like, no, we're just trying to not get you killed, so probably you should fucking listen. So, you can't win. You cannot take my fleet, not with the Ariel. The Ariel's just a starter set if it comes to that, but no, I probably can't win. What I can do is make an unholy mess. Divide your forces, screw you with your employer. Every weapon charge you expend, every piece of equipment, every soldier hurt is pure loss. And eventually Oser says, then what are you getting out of it? And he's like, I am not in it for anything, so I don't have a stake in wrecking anything in particular. Like, I will do what needs doing because I'm not trying to preserve anything beyond his own life. Um, any information you have from Cavillo is worth shit. Anything Cavillo says must certainly be sifted with great care, but, you know, anything that she says, we can find a way to make use of, which, I think that's a good, the term sifting, I really liked being used there. I feel like the term take it with a grain of salt implies very much like almost nothing they say should really be trusted, but sifting is a lot more. There are probably like little pearls in there somewhere that are meaningful, whether they even knew they were giving them to you or not, you know? So eventually, um, they come to an agreement, and he says, I've developed an idea or two on the problem that I'd be willing to share. Would you? As an alternative to my becoming your employee, I'm willing to become your employer. I'm authorized to offer a bona fide contract, all the usual perks, equipment replacement insurance from my sponsor. Not in conflict with Aslan's interests. You can collect twice for the same fight, and you don't even have to switch sides. What guarantees can you offer? It seems to me I'm the one who's owed a guarantee, sir. Let us begin with small steps. I won't start a mutiny. You stop trying to thrust me out airlocks. I will join you openly, everyone to know I've arrived. I will make my information available to you. We will confer. You may even have an angle I lack. Then we go on from there. So, Oser agrees, and they get into their negotiations. Um, and let's see, Thorne is like, I'm not sure what Oser is like. Why wouldn't he just stun us, take us prisoner, and fast penta us and question us? If he fast pentas me, I'll tell him exactly the facts I was going to tell him anyway, and he'll have fewer doubts. So much the better. So, yeah, he's got the slippers on still. Um, I really enjoy the fact that they're each calling each other Admiral all the time. And we have this moment. This is so delightful. We find out at the end of it that what Miles is doing here, leading them all through the ship to get a tour of everything, is I say ship, it's more of a station, I guess, but he is trying to have as many people see him as possible so that the Barrayard intelligence finds out where he is. So that he doesn't have to reach out to them and he won't be violating the terms that were set by Cavillo. But he, the kind of intelligence that the Barrayarans are investing in lately and the way they're watching the Dendaris, I'm going to keep calling them that. I don't care. They're not Oserans. I don't like him and he doesn't get his name on them. But I thought that was very clever, but then it winds up working to his advantage later because, surprise, Metsov shows up to try and kill him. This is, like, Metsov being here, it's so bizarre because to me it feels so clear how he is being set up. And yet, I don't get the impression he really saw it. And, I have this thing where I want to believe that Metsov, despite being bonkers, also has like a good strategic mind. And I had to step back and realize that I don't have a lot of basis for that. Like, when somebody talks a lot of shit, my instinct is to feel like they talk shit because they are viewing what other people are doing and the mistakes that they are making and have sort of contempt for it because they are working with more information and they are watching mistakes happen. And thus, I give credit when really people talk shit without having any sort of info all the time. It's just that I am not somebody who would talk shit without being in a position to really back that up. So I assume other people also would not do that, and that's laughable. That's just not how people are. So I was into this like of course, Metsov must have decided to go in for this because of something that he is planning. And the longer this goes on, the more I'm thinking that that is wrong and that he got played very effectively and just is a bit of a brute who doesn't think things through. And he was offered the chance to kill Miles, which he wanted anyway. And Cavillo had probably like it dangled it in front of him like a tasty treat. And maybe even pretended that she didn't want him to do it, to get it so that he was like coming over here allegedly against her wishes, that he was doing something that was like, a bit of a rebellion and proving the fact that she doesn't tell him what to do. Because I feel that's the exact way that he would lash out against a woman being in command of him. Um, so they managed to capture Metsov, and this is when we have the fast penta, y'all. This is so creepy. I'm gonna jump over to the spot where we start questioning him. Oh wait, but first, who is he? Asked Oser. Quite sincerely, Miles judged. Why, Admiral, I told you I was going to deliver you more intelligence data than your section could collect in a month. May I present? He made a gesture designed to evoke a waiter lifting a domed cover from a silver platter, but which probably looked like another muscle spasm. General Stanis Metsov, second in command, Randall's Rangers. Since when do senior staff officers undertake field assassinations? Excuse me, second in command as of 3 days ago. That may have changed. He was up to his stringy neck in Cavillo's schemes. You, I, and he have an appointment with a hypospray. You planned this? Why do you think I spent the last hour flitting around the station, if not to smoke him out? Miles said brightly. I love Miles. Have I just claimed to be brilliant or incredibly stupid? Oser looked as if he was trying to figure out the answer to that same question. Amazing. The fact that he plays it that way. Oh yeah, that's why I was doing the thing. That is so, so smart. This dude thinks on his feet like I don't know how your brain works. They're just and I've met people like this, a lot of times weirdly they are comedians, but just, snap from one thing to another and I am like, what is it like inside your head? It must be absolute chaos. Thoughts just flying in every direction at a speed that I cannot understand. Um so, chapter 14. He is in a cubicle meant to isolate so that they can watch while this guy is questioned. How hot can this man's information be? They let him go out in the field. Hot enough that I think you should have a chance to think about it before broadcasting it to a committee. You'll still have the recording. Are you up to this yet? As long as no one asks me to do brain surgery, yes, proceed. I have reason to suspect that time is of the essence. Oser nodded to Elena, who held up a hypospray to calibrate the dose, then pressed it to Metsov's neck. Metsov's eyes shut briefly in despair. After a moment, his clenched hands relaxed. The muscles of his face unlocked to sag into a loose, idiotic smile. The transformation was most unpleasant to watch. Without the tension, his face looked aged. And eventually, we get the description of it being something that induces a kind of euphoria. Y'all, there is something about this that is so it's so creepy. So what I'm picturing with Fast Penta is honestly, if we're being real, I was picturing Veritaserum from Harry Potter, and it is given to spoilers for book 4, eventually Mad Eye Moody, and he is spilling his guts in a sort of monotone, telling the facts with no edits, with no, like concealment, simply reciting the facts as if he were reading off a screen or a card of some kind and just not giving inflection or emotion to any of it. It's just straight facts and just the facts, ma'am. And so that was kind of how I thought Fast Penta would behave. But it seems like what Fast Penta does is a little bit more like getting somebody drunk, where a person is feeling so like good-natured and expansive that they don't conceal because they are so utterly relaxed that their guard is down. And something about that feels scarier to me. It's one thing to just say things with no emotion because they're coming out of you against your will. It's another thing to like be in a position where you are kind of enjoying the thing being done to you against your will or better judgment. Do you know what I'm saying? I found this so disturbing and just it was very unexpected to me. Um So they ask who sent you to kill Miles. Cabby did, of course. In fact, Cavillo shipped me back here herself. General Metsov was therefore set up because Metsov says something about how Miles escaped. Um, what target was your ground attack planned to be upon? Vervain, said Metsov. Even Oser's jaw dropped. The blood thudded in Miles' ears in the stunned silence. Vervain is your employer, Oser choked. God, it adds up. It's insane. So that's Cavillo's surprise? That's not the end of it, I'll bet. Cavillo's drop forces are bigger than ours by far, but no way are they big enough to take on a fully settled planet like Vervain on the ground. They can only raid and run. Raid and run, right. Metsov smiled equably. What was your particular target then? Banks, art museums, gene banks, hostages. That's a pirate raid, said Oser. What the hell were you going to do with the loot? Drop it off on Jackson's Hole on the way out? They fence it. How did you figure to escape the irate Vervain Navy? Hit them just before the new fleet comes online. See the Gandon invasion fleet'll catch them in orbital dock. Sitting targets. Easy. That's Cavilla's surprise. Yeah, that one's worthy of her, Miles whispered at last. Siege Gandon invasion? Oser unconsciously began to chew a fingernail. God, it fits, it fits! What's the only way to take a wormhole jump from both sides at once? The Vervani aren't Cavillo's employers, the Sita Gandons are. And now I see Metsov's place clear as day. This man was cashiered from the Barryaran Imperial Service for brutality. The Rangers raid, do a fast trash of Vervain. The Cetaganon invasion fleet jumps through into Vervani local space, probably on Cavillo's signal. The Cetaganons, out of the kindness of their hearts, rescue the planet from the treacherous mercenaries. The Rangers run. Metsov is left behind as goat, just like throwing the guy out of the troika to the wolves. Oops, that wasn't a very Baton metaphor. To be publicly hanged by the Cetagandons to demonstrate their good faith. See, this Barryaran, this evil man harmed you. You need our imperial protection from the Barryaran imperial threat. And here we are. And Cavillo gets paid 3 times. Once by the Vervani, once by the Cetagandons, and the third time by Jackson's Hole when she fences her loot on the way out. Everybody profits. Except the Vervani, of course. Oser was beginning to look convinced and worried. Do you think the Cetagandons plan to punch through into the hub, or will they stop at Vervain? Of course they'll punch through. The hub is the strategic target. Vervain is just a stepping stone to it, hence the bad mercenary setup. The Cetagandons want to expend as little energy as possible, fast pacifying Vervain. They'll probably label them an allied satrapy. I just saw this word and I realized, like, when I listened to it in the audiobook, I kind of stopped and was like, what does that mean? A province governed by a satrap. A satrap was a governor of the provinces of the ancient Median and Persian empires. Well, that's not helpful. Okay. Um, Absorb them economically over a generation. Will the Cetagandans stop at Pole? Will they try to take it on this one move, or leave it as a buffer between them and Barrayar? Conquest or wooing? If they can bait the Barrayarns into attacking through Pole without permission, it might even drive the Polians into a Cetagandan alliance. And Oser at this point is like, okay, you know what? I'm out. This is too much. We do not have anybody backing us up because he doesn't know that Barriar is backing them up. He is not aware of how this whole thing is already set up. And Miles also points out to Metsov that, like, or to Oser, Metsov would never have been sent to kill me with correct info still in his head. She would know there was a risk of him being captured, taken alive, and questioned. She'd know that. She was probably just hoping he would be killed, but she wouldn't rely on that happening. She's not a moron. So there has to be a different plan now. Like, this all is coming together for me in retrospect, but likely there is something else that she has shifted to, and we know it's Gregor. Unless I miss my guess, the Cetagandan invasion is now a considerable embarrassment to Cavillo. Admiral Naismith, I would believe that Cavillo would double-cross anyone you care to name, except the Cetagandans. They'd spend a generation pursuing their revenge. She couldn't run far enough. She wouldn't live to spend her profits. What conceivable profit outweighs triple pay? And Miles is aware, because of the play that she's trying to make to become Empress of Barrayar, that she is relying on the Baryaran planetary security to keep them from coming after her, because she will be in this basically untouchable position if everything goes to plan. And he can't share this because he isn't telling them about Gregor and the way that, things have changed in that respect. Um, so Cavillo's timing, she meant for the fleet to be paralyzed with infighting. If that's true, what to do? We're too far away, a day and a half from the action, which will be at the Vervain station wormhole. And beyond it in Vervani local space. We have to get closer. We have to move the fleet across system. Whoa, I'm not mounting a headlong attack against the Cetagandan Empire. You must. You'll have to fight them sooner or later. You pick the time or they will. The only chance of stopping them is at the wormhole. Once they're through, it will be impossible. If I move my fleet away from Aslan, the Vervani will think we're attacking them. And mobilize, go on the alert, good. But in the wrong direction, not good. We would end up being a feint for Cavillo. Damn, no doubt another branch of her strategy tree. Suppose she doesn't send her code. Oh, she still needs them, but for a different purpose. She needs them to flee from and to mass murder her witnesses for her. But she doesn't need them to succeed. In fact, she now needs their invasion to bog down, if she's really thinking as long-term as she should be in her new plan. Our only hope is to capture Cavillo and fight the Cetagandans to a standstill at the Vervain station wormhole. No, wait, we have to hold both sides until reinforcements arrive. What reinforcements? Aslan, Pole, once the Cetagandans actually materialize in force, they'll see their threat. And if Pole comes in on Barrayar's side instead of the Cetagandans, Barrayar can pour forces through via them. The Cetagandans can be stopped if everything occurs in the right order. Would the Barrayarans come in? Oh, I think so. Indeed. And he mentions, like, you must have seen an increase in Barrayaran activity, like, and he's like, yeah, actually, that is true. So, eventually Oser is like, all right, uh, we're not doing this. We don't have any of the backing that you're acting like we have. I am putting you guys in jail. I won't kill you, Miles, but you're going down to the brig. And just as he is saying this, a fucking touch from Elena on his neck gets him with fast penta. And he tries to, like, hit her off, but as this lands, his hand drops and he becomes very pliable in a way that, again, I didn't know fast penta would render you. He isn't, he is so, um, pliable is really the best word I can think of, because it's not like he is making any of the moves that follow himself. He is just being led through the motions and simply not putting up any sort of fight. Nobody is asking him any questions because Elena and Miles are between them and Oser. So they're getting him to, like, by his silence. I'm sorry if you can hear that. It's my washing machine. That shit is loud as hell all of a sudden. But yeah, this whole, like, the way that Fast Penta operates, when she hits him, I didn't know that's what she had in her hand. I thought that it was like something to knock him out. But I realized belatedly that Oser has some of his own people in view still. So if they saw her hit him with something that knocks him to the ground, they would know, oh, it's time to fucking square up. Like, we're being taken over. However, this makes it so that he just lets them do what they want and remains in a sort of Weekend at Bernie's, like, figurehead that they can pretend it's all according to his orders. So where they bring him back to his own quarters, the admiral's cabin, and they demand for Tongue to be brought, and they allege they are going to fast Penta and question him. Um, in the meantime, he is explaining to Elena all of the things that, like, have all of the things that have occurred with Gregor and the theory that he is running on with Cavillo, and they're trying to decide whether or not Gregor really thinks that he is going to be able to, like, pull this off with her, or if this is just a ploy. I really think it's a ploy, but the thing that I'm really kind of rubbing up against here is I have a hard time, based on who Cavillo has seemed to be to me. I have a hard time believing that she really thinks that becoming Empress of Barrayar via seducing Gregor is going to work. It feels like such a silly, in a way, approach. And I guess if she has dealt with men for as long as she has been in the game, which has been a minute, it seems, and if she has been underestimated by men repeatedly, I could see how she wouldn't believe Gregor was faking, because he is a young guy, impressionable, definitely like somebody who's lonely, and I'm sure she can pick up on that, the fact that he hasn't really been around anybody outside of his immediate circle because of the dangers posed, and that she could, like, capitalize on that. It just feels a little too transparent to me, the way that she came and talked to Miles and told him what she's thinking regarding the Barry Yarn people accepting her. I feel like that's an uncharacteristic showing of cards, and I have a hard time believing she would have told him that much. The only way that I could see this being valid is if she simply underestimated Miles' ability to think through all of the ramifications of everything and put a story together on what she's likely to do. Because Miles is so strategically brilliant that he is able to, like, follow each thing, to its next uh the next likely course of events. And based on, like, what we have seen of who she operates with and how things normally go, it doesn't seem like she usually has people around her who are up to her level. So she may just be, like, resting in a sense of security that he couldn't figure it out because she underestimates him. But I don't know. Giving him this, like, quizzing him the way that she does, planting the seed, and then sending him off, I can't help but feel like there's more to it. But maybe it's just what it looks like. I don't know. I don't know. Um so yeah, there's the chat between him and Elena. Uh, and oh, I love when he's like, if we need, well, we're going to need extra security inside in case Tung gets violent. So Chodak, you should come in with some of your people. And he is very specific on that. Um, and he says, Oser arrested Tung for arranging my getaway. Why didn't he go on to take you and Artie and Chodak and the rest of your cadre? He didn't arrest Tung for that. At least, I don't think so. He was baiting Tung, which is his habit. They were both on the bridge at the same time, and Tung finally lost his temper and tried to deck him. Did deck him, I heard, and was partway to strangling him when the security pulled him off. It had nothing to do with us then? I'm not sure. I wasn't there. It might have been an emergency diversion to get Oser's attention away from making just that connection. I love that idea that Tung was just like, you know what? I really want to deck this guy. Normally, I would hold myself back, but I need him to just like not think things through. So I'm just going to go ahead and give in to my impulse because for once it's going to work out. uh so this is when Tung comes in, and when I said in the intro that like Miles is so good at using circumstances to his advantage, this is the scene I really meant. So Tung sees Miles and is like, "Oh my God, you did it. We're back in business." And he like kind of grabs Miles by the shoulders a little bit. And I'm going to read this where is it? Here it is. Sorry, Kai. I can't be your front man this time. You've got to follow me. This is italicized. He's just thinking it to himself. Miles kept his face stern and removed Tung's hands from his shoulders with icy deliberation. That Vervani freighter captain you found delivered me straight to Commander Cavillo, and I've been wondering ever since if it was an accident. Ugh! Tung fell back, looking as if Miles had just hit him in the stomach. Miles felt as if he had. No, Tung was no traitor, but Miles dared not give up the only edge he had. Betrayal or botchery, Kai? And he then says, and have you stopped beating your wife in italics? I don't really know what that meant. If anybody wants to fill me in on what that was supposed to be, I'm very, like, unclear. Botchery, whispered Tung, gone sallow pale. Damn it, I'm going to kill the triple crossing. That's already been done, said Miles coldly. Tung's brows rose in surprised respect. I just want to analyze this moment for a second, you guys, because one, it would never have occurred to me to pretend that I was uncertain of Tung's loyalty. My instinct would be to like immediately go for you'll never believe what that fucking guy did. And immediately commiserate on how you got played. I know you got played. There's no way that you could have meant that to happen. That is not the way to go, though, because one, it shows such trust in Tung that potentially he could like use that to his advantage at a later point and assume that I would still think the best of him. You don't want anybody thinking they can get one over on you. And two, as Miles says, he's got his edge here. You need somebody who feels like now they have to make it up to you. Now they have to prove themselves. They have to put themselves in a position of basically obsequiousness to prove to you. Of course, I wasn't involved with that. And I will fall in line extra hard to make it clear to you over time. And that way you can trust me again. Brilliant. And then when he says that's already been done, again, I would have been like, oh, he's already dead. Cavillo killed him. I would have given the fucking credit for that to Cavillo instantly, thinking really that I was giving her the blame. But Miles is framing it so that it's him, like, tacitly saying, I've taken care of it already because that's how fast I move. That is how on it I am. So you think you're going to handle a thing that's been handled. Trust me, I know how to run my shit. And so he can like use this just by not saying and make himself seem all the more formidable and one step ahead. I loved it, you guys. It never even would have entered my mind to handle things this way. And honestly, in a lot of ways, and this is going to sound really fucked up, but like when I was younger, I loved my mother. And to a degree, I have to acknowledge that she did grow up in a type of patriarchy that is very difficult for me to envision now, even though I know that it's still very real. It's just been sort of hidden. So growing up, my mother would give me advice on dating and how to handle men in relationships and basically ways to manipulate them. And this sort of thing of being like, he may not have done it on purpose, but if you treat it like you think he did it on purpose, he is going to be on his best behavior to try and make it up to you. Basically, acting as if you're keeping score, which is like the worst way to operate in a relationship, actually, if you're trying to have a healthy relationship. But my mother didn't understand healthy relationships at the time. She understood like being in a relationship with a person who outranks you, so to speak, in terms of their resources, their power, because that's what she was in with my father. And you have to make do with whatever tools you have. So this kind of like manipulation actually reminds me so much of that. And it's like just a much more heightened, high stakes version of it. But really, when I backed up and thought about it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, because you're supposed to be keeping score in this kind of scenario. You know, when you're in a military setting, or in this case, mercenary setting, the debts that people owe you and the way they feel they have to prove themselves to you, that matters so much that I kind of have to get back into that headspace here when really over the past 10 years, I've been working so much to get out of that headspace so that my marriage to Owen does not go the way my marriage to Brendan went. So anyway, it was a real moment of like, wow, I definitely respect the way that he plays this. And clearly, Tongue respects him all the more for this as well. And it comes down to Miles telling Tongue, if we do like engage with this, you are going to have to answer to me. I am your commander, or we're not doing this at all. And Tongue says, Daddy Kai's little boy is growing up, it seems. That's not the half of it. Are you in or out? The other half of this is something I've got to hear. In. Done. So he explains mostly I'm not a normal mercenary. I'm being paid by Barry Yarn Imperial Security to find and rescue a hostage. On the side, I hope to stop a now imminent Cetigandan invasion fleet from taking over the hub. Our second strategic priority will be to hold both sides of the Ravane wormhole jump and as much else as we can till Barry Yarn reinforcements arrive. Second priority? What if they don't arrive? There's Pole to cross, and hostage rescue does not normally take precedence over fleet-wide strat-tac ops. Given the identity of this hostage, I guarantee their arrival. The Baryaran Emperor, Gregor Vorbara, was kidnapped. I found him, lost him, and now I've got to get him back. That skinny, neurasthenic git you had in tow before, that was him? Yes, it was. I had never seen the word neurasthenic either. Noun, an ill-defined medical condition characterized by lassitude, fatigue, headache, and irritability associated chiefly with emotional disturbance. I am sort of putting this in the category of like moody and depressed, really, you know? Um, so between you and I managed to deliver him straight to Cavillo. Oh, shit. She'll sell him straight to the Seat of Gandans. No, she means to collect her reward from Barriar. Wait a minute, it's complicated. Yeah, it is indeed. Um, so eventually he says the next step is you have to make up to Captain Awson. And Tongue is like, the fuck I will. And Miles says, we need the triumph. We need it. And you can't reorganize everything this close. He's got to be the one. So you got to do it. And then we get the beautiful scene where he comes in. I love when he sees Miles and he just says, oh, hell, not you again. Bless him. um, he sees Oser and is just like, oh shit, what's up with him? Um, and Austin, he's like, Miles says to him, do you happen to recall how you graduated from command of the Ariel to command of the Triumph? Austin pointed to Tongue. What about him? And eventually Miles is like, you are going to have to apologize. And Tongue is like, all right, well, I'm really sorry that I said that your mom was a whore and that you're ugly and that your feet stink and that you are the stupidest person I've ever met. And I'm really sorry for your idiotic approach to everything. Like, it's the most insulting. And eventually, finally, and this is so great, Austin, you can be a real shithead sometimes. But damn it, you can fight when you have to. I've seen you. In the tight and the bad and the crazy, I'll take you at my back before any other captain in the fleet. One side of Austin's mouth curled up. Now that's sincere. Thank you so much. I will mention that there's a little moment where Austin accuses Thorne of being in love with Miles and makes some unsavory comments, but we will dance right on past that. Uh, Elena gets very defensive of Miles in this moment, and he thinks that the expression on her face when she's holding the stunner on Austin reminds him a little too much of her father, and he is like, yikes. um, so the two of them have another moment alone together, and he says, I want you to interrogate Metsov again and pull out all of the data that you can, edit out any unfortunate references he may make to my real identity, and pass it on to Ops. You know, the planetary patriots like the Baryarans have it wrong. Our officer cadre thinks that mercenaries have no honor because they can be bought and sold. But honor is a luxury only a free man can afford. A good Imperial officer like me isn't honor bound, he's just bound. How many of these honest people have I just lied to their deaths? It's a strange game. I really like that. You know, like this is something that always has sort of bothered me, is the concept of honor being like, for some people you can lean on that and you will still be okay. But other people, if you decide that to make that your priority, they will be killed. You are not in the same position as everybody else. And so for there to be this sort of line in the sand that we determine what is honorable and what isn't, as if everybody is risking the same things, it's not correct. It's not honest or fair. Um, and he says, am I doing the right thing? And she says, certainly. So you, my Barryaran lady who hates Barryar, are the only person in the hub I can honestly sacrifice. Thank you, my lord. She touched her hand to the top of his head, passing out of the chamber. Miles shivered. And that's the end of chapter 14. So I think cutting back was the right call, guys, because I just barely got to the end of chapter 14. Granted, I had to cover the end of chapter 12, but I'm still over time. So, doing what we can here. But yeah, I'm very excited to see what happens, and Miles is still in love with Elena, clearly. I was kind of hoping that would have like left his system by now. I'm not mad that it's still there. I just, I had my hopes. But what can you do? Can't have it all. All right, everybody. Thank you again for listening, for commissioning, and until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.